Welcome to Oracles of Eye Innovation, MedDevice's monthly podcast exploring entrepreneurship in medical devices, particularly in ophthalmology. With me today is Michael O'Rourke, who is the CEO of Re-Vana, which is a pharmaceutical drug delivery device company that is working on a very interesting technology that Michael will talk to you about in a second. Michael and I go back 26 years when we were working together on the global strategy team for the surgical business. So I've seen Michael, his career path, follow a very specific direction, and that's why we've invited him on today. So, Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you are today?
Hi, Kris, and good to connect with you again. I'm originally from Glasgow, Scotland. I started my career as a chemistry high school teacher, but quickly went into pharmaceutical sales. I was a drug rep for 4 years with 3M Pharmaceuticals in the UK. But after 4 years, I went into marketing to move down to England to their head office in Loughborough and worked across cardiovascular and respiratory products. So about 8 or 9 years with 3M Pharmaceuticals. Then wanted international marketing, so I joined Pfizer Hospital Products. Came back into pharma in '93 with the Alza Corporation. Alza was a Palo Alto-based company. It was the world's biggest drug delivery company. J&J eventually bought them for $12 billion. I was responsible for setting up the European business, and together we launched the world's first ever sustained release periodontal product. So I came into ophthalmology in 1995 with Chiron Vision. So really joined them in about 95. So as you can see, it's now 30 years I've been in ophthalmology. But Chiron was a great company. So I inherited a whole range of different products, medical device, intraocular lenses. But interestingly, it had a drug delivery product, which was the Vitrasert implant, the Jansanclovir implant. So I was responsible for launching that into Europe in 1996. And it was really the world's first ever sustained release intraocular drug delivery product containing the antiviral drug Jansanclovir. It was treating, back then, at the height of the AIDS epidemic, it was treating CV retinitis, which was a late onset HIV condition in the eye. So instead of infusions for the patients, what this did was a direct delivery of the drug straight into the retina. It delivered for between 4 and 6 months. So this was really pretty groundbreaking because this had never been done before
Yeah.
with that type of drug. So that really was the origin of intraocular drug delivery devices, which we launched in 1996. So after a couple of years, we were acquired by Bausch and Lomb. So I moved out to California for the first 3 years. I was involved with refractive cataract, but also retained the drug delivery component, and then headed up to Rochester, New York, where I headed up global pharma for another 3 years, trying to fill the pipeline, and then came down to Tampa, where I'm based today, in 2004, really appointed as general manager to run the pharmaceutical business for Bausch and Lomb. So during that period, actually in 2005, we launched into the US, the world's second intraocular drug delivery product, which is still on the market today, which is Retisert, fluocinolone acetonide, treating non-infectious posterior uveitis. I ran a consultant group for a number of years, Scotia Vision, but I took over as the first CEO of Graybug, based out of Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. This was a startup company working with nanoparticle, microparticle drug delivery technologies. So I was about 3 years with Graybug, raised capital for them, did deals with them, got grants, but I had the opportunity to join Re-Vana, really to expand and really in many cases take the whole idea of ocular drug delivery to a whole new platform. And this really meant taking on board two really photocross-linked hydrogel implant technologies that Re-Vana had developed. And the whole idea was to look at how we could deliver sustained release biologics in the eye, but to be delivered in the clinic, something that had never been done before. And also to look at the delivery of novel drugs, the sustained release of novel drugs, which again, if you look at all the drug delivery technologies so far in the ocular space, they've all been approved drugs, generic drugs, steroids, antiviral drugs. There's never been, and it's a big challenge to take a novel technology with a novel drug But nonetheless, that's really one of the major opportunities that really lie ahead. So Re-Vana was a spin-out company from Queen's University in Belfast in Northern Ireland. So being still based in Tampa, it involved really a lot of back and forth, which is still the case today. But really quickly got Re-Vana established. It was really, I think when I took it over, it was pretty much a PhD thesis. So really took Re-Vana really from the very, very beginning of the company, based in an academic center, working with a couple of the co-founders. But fairly quickly we raised 1.6 million to give us some seed money to come into the company. Clearly the technologies had a tremendous potential. The first one was called iLeaf. In this case, what we do is we photo cross-link the implant before it goes into the eye with the UV light. And one of the secret sauce of Re-Vana is how we use photo cross-link, and we use light instead of heat to prepare the implants. And that gave us the means and the ability to deliver biologics into the eye with a biodegradable implant delivered in the clinic, which nobody had ever accomplished before. The second technology is the same chemistry, but we inject it as a liquid into the eye. This is called Oculeaf. So it's an in situ forming implant. In this case, we photo cross-link it in situ, but with visible light. So we don't put UV light into the eye. We developed a really quite remarkable applicator with Cambridge Design Consultants, Cambridge in England, that allows us really to deliver drug and photo cross-link it at the same time. So these two technologies really gave us the basis for how to build Re-Vana. But having been in this industry in drug delivery for quite some time, I wanted to make sure Re-Vana was not just a platform company, not just a service company. So quickly put together a strategy, which is still pretty much the same today. And that is to say, we're looking to build internal assets. So we want to bring in our own drugs, license our own products, and raise capital against that. But externally, work with big pharma to build and to secure strategic collaborations. And I can explain that a little bit more. So after we raised the 1.6 million, I then reached out, having been in the States since 1998, reached out to US venture capital groups, and managed to bring in 3 of the leading ophthalmic venture capital groups today. That's Visionary Ventures in California, Excite Ventures between California and also New York, and InFocus Capital based out of Chicago. So these are venture capital groups with 100% focus on ophthalmology.
Right.
And I think, obviously it takes a little bit of time, but managed to secure a small pre-series round in 2020. And it was the first time that these 3 venture capital groups had invested into the same company. So we raised about 3.25 million back then to give us some momentum. But we're also raising money in the UK as well. Queen's University has its own internal venture capital group called Cubus. So they came into the early seed round and the pre-series A. But we also brought in Invest Northern Ireland, Clarendon Associates, and TechStart. So we really surrounded ourselves with really some fantastic, very supportive venture capital groups and investors who are still with us today, and their support has been really fantastic. But again, we used that money to build the infrastructure of the company, put the IP in place, and it became clear that as a startup company in an academic center, you need to gradually transition the company to a biotech company.
Yeah.
You're not going to really get the full. You're not going to realize the company and everything it takes in pharmaceuticals if you're just working with academic colleagues. So we had to start bringing in folk with industry experience. And that really came to a head at the end of 2022, whereby we raised another $12 million with the same venture capital groups, but they were investing more on a pro rata basis. But we also brought in a corporate investor as well. So we're really setting ourselves up now to be recognized as an emerging biotech company. Re-Vana is very unique. We're one of the few companies in the world that have taken on board the challenge of how to deliver an anti-VEGF drug on a sustained release basis. To date, we've now worked with 20 different therapeutics, 10 are biologics, but also worked with small drugs, complement drugs, and large molecules. So the 2 different platforms, albeit our focus is sustained release biologics, we do have the capability and the flexibility to deliver other therapeutics as well across those categories. The other sort of unique factor about Re-Vana is we can customize our technology to a very specific target product profile. So we're looking at our internal assets, we're looking at external collaborations. We would work with a company that says, okay, what is the target product profile? What's the size of the drug? How long do you want to deliver it for? What's the target release rates? What's the therapeutic dose? And we have a model that then allows us to customize that target product profile against one of our technologies, either iLeaf or Oculeaf. So it allows us to really work with a very wide spectrum of therapeutics from biologics down to small molecules as well. And this has really enabled us to progress our internal assets and to build on our external collaborations. So for the internal assets, we're currently working on a 6-month sustained release of aflibercept. We also have a backup second asset, which is a second generation bispecific product as well. So these would be anti-VEGF drugs, essentially, obviously for serious retinal disease, delivering for 6 months or greater in the eye. On the external side, we've worked with some major companies. We tend to work more, maybe perhaps initially it was on a feasibility type base. These companies give us their drugs. We look to see if we can then deliver them, because each drug has to be treated on its own merits. So we have a pretty detailed program as to how we test the feasibility, and we can then determine after a number of months if that specific molecule, that specific therapeutic is going to be a match for one of our technologies. So we have a very, very experienced team now that are capable of doing this. It really came to a head back in July of this year. On the 28th of July, we announced a strategic collaboration with Boehringer Ingelheim of Germany. So this is a deal which amounts to, it's really $1 billion deal for Re-Vana, plus royalties. It allows us to take up to 3 of Boehringer's therapeutics in any 1 year, and to put those into the work with those and put them into our technology, either iLeaf or Oculeaf. So we've already started on that. We are already making fantastic progress with the first therapeutic. I was presenting at the OIS in San Diego just last week, and I was on the stage, and I said, I was asked the questions to how was this deal made, and we were quite happy to say, this took about 2 years. I first met them back in June 23 of the OIS in Seattle. And after a presentation, the Boehringer team approached me, and we really started to build the dialogue and the communication from them. So long story cut short, after pretty extensive due diligence, as you can imagine, we were really pleased to announce the deal back in July. So Boehringer have really been really a fantastic company to work with. One of the beyond the due diligence, and clearly with making sure our technologies were in place and IP and everything else was in place. One of the real key drivers of the relationship has been the chemistry between the teams. And we've found really from the outset that our team was able to work extremely well with the Boehringer team. And the chemistry built up, and it's such an important aspect of getting a deal done. You have to be able to work with your partner. As we sit today, we're looking at 2 internal assets. We're trying to break ground here by being, as I say, maybe one of the few companies, if not the only company in the world, that can look at 6 months of sustained-release biologics, biodegradable in the clinic, but keeping to build. It's really a hybrid strategy with our external collaborations deals as well. So we've now expanded the team from starting back in 2017 with a PhD thesis. We're now a team of 20. So 3 of us are based here in the States, but our team of 17 scientists, ranging from VPs of quality, VP of R&D, are all based in Belfast in Northern Ireland. So we have the advantage of having a footprint in both Europe and the UK and in the US. And this has really enabled us to reach out to different investment groups. And so far, even although there's a virtual component to this, it's actually worked remarkably well. We have a really highly skilled team now. We've transitioned from the academic setup to really emerging biotech company. We have I think the team we have in Belfast, as I was talking to Patrick, our CEO, we would be quite happy putting this team up against anyone now in Silicon Valley. We really think we have a fantastic team on board, very passionate, very committed. When you work in a startup company, it's different from to state the obvious, from a 9 to 5 job. This is a job. I said last week at the OIS, you really need to be addicted to this job. You need to be addicted to your startup company,
Yep.
because you're working, long hours, multiple day, up to 7 days a week. You just need to be prepared to do whatever it takes when you're in the startup world. So if it's 9 to 5 you're looking for, it may make this very clear if we're interviewing everyone. We say, look, here's what, this is a fantastic opportunity. It's going to give you remarkable access to investors, to some brilliant scientists, to true innovation in ophthalmology. We know that, what happens when patients have retinal diseases, blinding diseases. You can truly make a difference here, because ultimately we're trying to reduce the treatment burden. There's somewhere, there's about 25 million injections, intravitreal injections a year in the eye. Patients are getting it anywhere between 3 to 9 injections a year. So our
Yep.
goal here is to reduce the treatment burden, and we do that through sustained release technology. So 6 months or greater sustained release of our biodegradable implants is our strategy for really long-term thinking about how to reduce the treatment burden, because the people are growing older, population is growing older, it's getting bigger, there's more and more eye disease occurring both in incidence and in prevalence. So we're able to think about this long term. And we believe that the future of new therapeutics coming into the eye over the next 10, 20, 30 years really is going to have a sustained release basis to it, because the days of trying to give a monthly injection are really gone. It's got to be, extended delivery of drugs. But our approach is sustained release. So we can take, say, a wide range of drugs, including established therapeutics or novel drugs, and put those into our technology. So really, we found ourselves today in a very strong place, but we're still early. We recognize the challenges ahead, but we're really, really excited to take these challenges on board.
It's interesting. Well, everything you said is very interesting, but the point about intravitreal injections, I was working on another project a couple months ago and ran the numbers, and it's estimated that there'll be a need for 175 million intravitreal injections on an annual basis by 2030. So 5 years from now. There are not enough ophthalmologists, there are not enough healthcare providers in the world to deliver that kind of volume of injections. So yes, you would think that the push would be on drug delivery devices that could reduce that burden and, more efficiently treat chronic disease, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's probably not going to be enough ophthalmologists, enough retina
Mm-mm.
physicians to treat the patient base. So the whole idea of reducing the treatment burden is certainly something that the retina community is looking for, as well as patients, obviously, because when patients are in a clinical study and they receive intravitreal injections, compliance is very high. Best corrected visual acuity is high. But when patients come into the real world, when they leave the safety and the sort of of a clinical environment where they're meeting folk and have been managed and so on, when they come into the real world, the compliance drops significantly, and best corrected visual acuity drops. We saw this with the Lucentis studies. So we know what happens when patients come back into the real world. There's really only two ways to resolve it. Either you have extended duration efficacy of therapeutics, but we know that some of the therapeutics that claim 4 months or whatever, really it's only a portion of patients that reach those levels.
Yeah.
The second way to do it is to have a higher percentage of patients reaching, let's say, 6 months or greater with sustained release. And that's exactly the Re-Vana approach. We're 100% focused today in ophthalmology, focused on 6 months or greater delivery. That's the basis of our whole strategy.
And you talked about when you joined Re-Vana, it was basically a PhD thesis. What is it like transitioning a company, unwinding a company that's basically started as a university-based project into a real world company? Because we all hear about the failure of, that something like 75% of all technology transfers out of universities will fail. So what are the key success factors to make that happen correctly?
Yep, many different aspects to answer that particular question. I think for Re-Vana, there were two co-founders that got the company sort of started. I think for us, we were quite fortunate being based in Queen's University.
Mm.
So Queen's University in Belfast for a couple of years there was the number one university in Britain to take startup companies to an IPO or commercialization stage. They're quite unique in the sense that they have their own internal investment arm. It's like an internal venture capital group in the university. In this case, called Cubus, that was headed up by Brian McCall, and he really helped champion Nirvana at the beginning. So we were able to raise internal money enough to get started. And then because of that collaboration or really the network within Belfast, we were able to bring in, as I say, the equivalent of Invest Northern Ireland, Techstart in Clarendon. So they invested at the very beginning, but on the condition that someone came in to run the company. So I came in 2017 on that basis. So my appointment triggered some early cash coming in. So that was important. We had at least the basis of some funding. It's then a case of really mapping out really a program of ultimately it's down to initially it's proof of concept. It's proving through different development programs that your technologies actually work and it can deliver drugs. So we use some of that money to do some really early animal studies to show that, from a feasibility perspective, we could actually deliver these drugs. IP is extremely important, obviously. So we had to make sure we had our founding IP was in place, and we worked initially with a team from Switzerland that helped us really put our IP programs together. And then it's a gradual, for me, it's all about clearly with your resources, it's bringing expertise into the company. And that really means bringing in folk with teams with industry experience. When we then raised the additional 12 million in 2022, that then allowed us to bring in more, to expand the team and to make some changes in terms of how our IP was managed and so on. So that really allowed us to strengthen the company. But along the way, we were doing collaborations with pharma companies as well. And from an internal asset perspective, it's tough for a young company to source or to license assets because you don't have the capital for major upfront. So you have to be quite creative in the deals that you do. So many different factors there, but it's all about having a startup mindset and really to make sure you're bringing in seasoned individuals that understand the industry, understand pharmaceuticals, and as I've said earlier on, really understanding what it takes to work in a startup company. I would say that out of the 7 or 8 years that we've been running, I think only maybe two people have left the company. So we've got a really high retention rate
Yeah.
because everyone sees the value and the experience and the opportunity that really is in front of them here.
Yeah, I think to your point, getting people who get excited about the challenge and about, at least in our startup environment, no 2 days are ever the same. And, looking at working with innovation on a daily basis is really, to me, it's really critical to the success of building a team and keeping them together. Because if they're not challenged, if they're not, wired into what you're doing, then it's, they should just leave. So I think, yeah, to your point, that recruitment is really critical in how you grow that business. Um, One thing I'm curious about, because you say that you're able to use these just about any molecule, any biologic in the devices. Are you concerned that the market, the industry, physicians will get confused by the indications that there are too many things, that you're all the things? Or is this the best way to address it? To just go after, the whole schematic of diseases that could potentially be treated with an implant.
Well, I think, when you're dealing with the retina community, you're working with some of the smartest folk in the world, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And these are highly skilled, and very capable surgeons and specialists. Their whole life is treating patients.
Yep.
Before Lucentis came out in 2006, before anti-VEGF drug came out, I remember one retina physician telling me, they spend their day giving patients bad news because there's nothing they can do for them. Then that all changed when anti-VEGF drugs come out. So the retina community, I believe, really welcomes innovation. It welcomes choice. They're able to manage. Each patient is different. There may not be one particular drug or one particular approach that's suitable for everyone. They have a large sort of tool of possibilities, and I think they can manage these pretty well, actually, is my experience. There aren't clearly, when I started back in retina in 1995 with Chion Vision, there was very few people in retina. As you remember, it was more a medical device or instrument type approach.
Yeah.
But fast forward 30 years and you see the companies that are now in retina, it's completely transformed, right? So I was in it from the very beginnings, and I've seen how retina has really emerged, both from a pharmaceutical and still from a medical device perspective over the years. And of course, retina is now one of the fastest growing areas of ophthalmology. It's going to be
Right.
so by 2029, retina will be a $24 billion market, just in the pharmaceutical sense. Doesn't include the medical,
Surgical part.
the surgical.
That's a big number.
We're seeing anti-VEGF drugs, we're seeing bispecific, we're seeing complement drugs now. So by those three segments, they make up the 24 billion by 2029. Re-Vana's in these segments. We have an anti-VEGF aflibercept, we've got a bispecific, what we're talking about. We also have experience of delivering complement drugs as well. So we work very closely, as I say, with scientific advisory board, with leading retina physicians. There are clearly other technologies, other therapeutics in development at the moment, but we believe from a competitive standpoint that anti-VEGF drugs will remain the number one treatment of choice going forward. And with that, a sustained release goes hand in hand. So we're really confident that our strategy and our approach is really going to match the really what's going to be required or demanded of retina products over the next 10 years. But I will say, another aspect of building a biotech company is you have to be adaptive. I remember reading a venture capital book that said 75% of companies that follow their business plan fail. And they fail because they don't adapt to the environment, they don't adapt to new competitors. So we have a really robust strategic planning model whereby every 3 or 4 times a year at least, we review our entire strategy and we make necessary changes if the market or there's new regulations or whatever really demands it. So we have to be extremely adaptive in what we do. And I think that's been borne out by Re-Vana from the very beginning because, even though our broad strategy has remained the same, internal assets, external collaborations, how we do it and how we implement it, of course, changes as you really move along here.
Right.
But I think to your question, it's great for the patient. There's going to be new therapeutics in the future. But our strong belief is that at the heart of that is going to be a sustained release in the next 10, 20 years.
Why has it taken 30 years to get to where we are today?
Yeah, it's a good question. So sustained release, when you're talking really, how do you take a technology and how do you match it with a drug? Just developing a drug on its own is challenging enough. Managing and developing a technology has its own challenges. Now you're putting the two of them together, right? And there's a multitude of things that have to work, that have to be, it has to meet all the requirements of pharmaceutical development. That in itself is the challenge. So for instance, In the biologic front, many companies tried to deliver biologics in the past on a sustained release basis to be delivered in the clinic, but failed. So three of the big barriers just how that really caused the failure. One is that was the bioactivity, was the stability of the protein of the biologic in the eye. And we've overcome that, and we've shown that we do have good stability with our technology. The second challenge that caused failure was drug loading. How do you get enough drug into the implant? In our case, we've achieved greater than 20%, way up to 50% of drug loading by weight, so we can get a lot of drug into the implant. And that really means you've got good chances of reaching a therapeutic dose. Some companies have delivered drugs, but maybe they deliver them only for a month or 2 months. It's just not going to be enough, or they don't get a therapeutic dose. So that's the second cause of the second barrier that caused a lot of failure that Re-Vana's overcome. The third barrier, and it's probably the single biggest cause of failure of drug delivery technologies, is poor tolerability in the eye. If you have inflammation in the eye, your technology is pretty much dead, right?
Done. Yeah.
So those are just three of the more common. You have to then show release rates. If it's a biodegradable implant, you have to show when it's going to biodegrade. In our case, if we deliver for 6 months, our implant will biodegrade at roughly 10 months, which is really acceptable to the retina community. So there's all these barriers you have to overcome. The eye is a tough organ of the body to work with, as you know, the blood-brain barrier and so on. But so there's numerous obstacles, and I think that has been what has been challenging.
So projecting forward, what do the next 5 years look like for Re-Vana and you?
So our goal here is to get one of our technologies with therapeutic into the clinic. We recognize where we are today, what we've still got to prove. So internally, it's driving our assets forward. It's raising our Series B. We've raised about 18 million to date, 16 in venture capital. We've raised 2 million with a grant, essentially UK grants, for instance. So bringing non-dilutive money into the company is extremely important. Our collaborations allow non-dilutive money to come in. So it's driving towards the clinic, but equally it's expanding our collaborations. Again, we're working with Boehringer is really fantastic, but we need to expand on that as well. So those are the two primary drivers for us. That all takes time.
Yeah.
But those are the two main goals. We want to really establish ourselves as the company who has truly transformed ocular drug delivery in the eye, moving away from just steroids or the early antiviral drug, taking on board the tough drugs, the tough challenges like biologics or novel therapeutics. That's how we want to transform ocular drug delivery. That's the reason I joined Re-Vana at the very beginning. And that's very much the philosophy of our team. Everyone recognizes that's what they're here to do. And I think they do come into work every day, really with that in mind. So far, we're really making quite remarkable progress. So excited as to what lies ahead. Excited as 30 years in ophthalmology. It's been an incredible area of medicine to work in. So I've been very fortunate, and I won't say looking forward to the next 30, but maybe looking forward to the next 5. Anyway.
Next 5, yeah. All right. Thanks very much, Michael, for joining us today.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Oracles of Eye Innovation podcast. If you have an idea for an upcoming podcast or would like to be interviewed, please contact us at the email address in the podcast show notes. Until next time, I'm your host, Kris Morrill.